correlated subqueries are where the inner query can't run independently of the outer query. So here we have our example from before. For a correlated subquery, we have select screening ID, customer ID, and then our inner query select count seat ID from reserved seat where booking ID equals b.id, and then back to our outer query from bookings b order by screening ID. So you can see here in the inner query we have b.id, so we're referring to data in the outer query, so from bookings b, so from this table. So first I actually want to run the outer query on its own. So here I've select screening ID, customer ID from bookings, and I've ordered that by the screening ID. So you can see that's the outer query for this subquery here. So let's run that without the inner query first. And you can see it's returned the screening ID and the customer ID from the bookings table, and I've ordered it by the screening ID, so we have 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, etc. So you can see for screening ID 1 we have a booking made by customer 4, 12 and 16. For screening ID 2 we have a bookings made by customers 2, 6 and 18, etc, etc. So now we can see the results from the outer query. Let's run the entire subquery. So you can see we have the same two columns from before. We have the screening ID and the customer ID from the bookings table, but we also now have a third column. We have a count on the seat ID. So basically this is saying that for screening ID 1, customer ID 4 reserved two seats, and for screening 1, customer ID 12 reserved 2 seats, and customer ID 16 reserved 4 seats, etc, etc. And basically what is happening is that for every row in the outer query, so for every screening ID and customer ID combination, this inner query is running. So this inner query is running for screening ID 1 plus customer ID 4, and it's running for screening ID 1, customer ID 12, and it's counting the number of seats. So the seat ID, so counting the seat ID for screening ID 1 and customer ID 4, screening ID 1, customer 12, etc, etc. So this inner query is running multiple times. It's running for every single row that was returned by the outer query. So this is what a correlated subquery looks like. And we know that this is a correlated subquery because if we try and run this inner query independently of the outer query, we're going to get an error. So let's run it and see what happens. So here we have the inner query, select count seat ID from reserved seat where booking ID is equal to b.id. So let's run that, and you can see we get an error. We're getting unknown column b.id in where clause. So basically it doesn't know what this b.id is, it doesn't know what this b table is, it doesn't know what this id column is, and that's because we've referenced the bookings table as b in the outer query. So when we run the inner query, we need this outer query to know what b stands for. So the inner query can't run independently of the outer query, so it's a correlated subquery. You see we get results when we run the whole subquery. And basically this where clause here is making the link between the booking ID field in the reserved seat table and the ID field in the bookings table. So every time there's a match between these two, it's going to run this inner query. And we know from before that the booking ID column in the reserved seat table is a foreign key to the ID field in the bookings table. Okay, so that's it for correlated subqueries. Hopefully you can see the difference between non